to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
How was Alabama?
Two GIFs.
Florida and Alabama.
Yeah.
It was like a crazy trip.
And Matt, you got to see Matt?
Got to see Matt for a
Sarah.
little bit. And
Hey, Matt.
Vica.
Yeah. Mac. Hey, Macavica.
Yeah, so we got to see everybody. Yeah, stay with Matt before all the Eagles Wings disc golf stuff started in Florida. But we did a training camp for the pros, which was amazing.
Good.
And then did a conference. Conference was amazing. And then, I got to hang out with Matt for a bit. Before I left, I was hanging out with him at one of his shops, and there was something wrong with some kind of display shelf, and his employees were like, it's like a metal one that you like snap together, and his employees were like, this thing's done, it's never gonna get fixed again. And he like literally turns to me and goes, hey man, do you think this thing's done or can it be fixed?
That's awesome.
So we fixed his shelf.
That's cool.
I did tell him it's not going to function anyways, but he was like, bro, I need you in Florida. I was like, you mean in Florida just to fix your junk?
Yeah, that's right.
Fix your display shelf.
Yeah.
Micah's whole job title is display shelf
Uproot
fixer.
the whole family to go to go be the display fixer.
That's on his business card.
Exactly.
He comes into 7-Elevens. He's like, hey, look, I can fix that if you
I
need
can
me
fix
to.
that for you.
I moved here just for this.
Just
okay?
for this.
Man, he's been wanting me to do breaks for their stuff. And he was like, man, I got
Breaks?
so he has a sports and collectibles, like cards company that he does. So what they do is they do live streams through an app called Drip. They also do Facebook Lives and stuff like that. And what they do is they call opening a new box a break. And so they have a very specific box, like people
like super expensive boxes.
Yeah. Like people can, like they do certain promotions where you can either like pick a team and you pay a certain amount to get every card for that team. You can pay a certain amount to be in for like the bounty draw. And there's like cards that are like, there's only one in all of existence, which is crazy. I think he told me like the odds of ever getting one is super low. And then he had 3 breaks in a row where they got one each time. Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's crazy. So he was texting me the other day and he was like, I need PCC to have to do a live stream to do a break for me. He's like, do you like anything? And I was like, I don't know what I could bring for you guys.
He was like, Pierce would be great personality wise. I was like, but yeah, Pierce knows nothing about sports. So
he was like, do you like Magic the Gathering or something? And I was like, I have no idea, man.
I asked him because he was telling me he wanted you to do the breaks. I was like, do they have Harry Potter cards?
There we go.
There you
They
go.
have
That'd be
Jurassic
awesome.
Park cards. They could do those.
I should go in just to fly in there for like a weekend and just be the hype man in the background, just screaming.
Matt, what do you need me for? Because you've got
a
your
display
shelf
fixer.
You got your break. You got your break, man.
The break man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I got to see his little office space where they're doing the breaks and
That's
stuff.
dope.
That's
man.
neat.
Cool, yeah. And we hung security cameras.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And anyways,
I think I'm not because anything has happened, but I've been thinking about it since we've moved out to the country. I think that this year I'm going to go ahead and put up some Ring security cameras just on the back of my house and on the side.
it's
and
smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just an extra layer of precaution. And
Robert told me too after my almost break-in on
Yeah.
New Year's Eve that the motion censored floodlight security things are like money.
Good
worth their
deterrence.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. And in my case, I think the best security you can have is a giant dog.
Yeah.
That's true.
We have
That's very true.
rabbits.
That'll do it.
I feel like if you had like a crate of like 50 rabbits and you're like, sick them, like open that, that'd be pretty terrifying as a burglar.
Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail of that rabbit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
awesome.
man. Well, hey, let's step on over to the PCC, everybody. Hey, welcome. Sit down, get comfortable. So it's probably only been like 2 or 3 weeks since I've actually talked about this, but I'm going to go back to it. There's just so many more things that are new and happening with the world of VR and AR that I'm going to keep track of it. I'm really enjoying it. So this one, I'm torn between loving it and hating it. And I'll tell you why. So I saw recorded footage of a guy who went into, so it's obviously a VR screen recording, I guess is the best way. You're seeing what he's seeing is the best way to say it. So, and he walks into a bedroom, and the bedroom is very much the 90s. Like there's different 90s posters on the wall. There's a big Jurassic Park poster. You can see all the VHS stuff on his bookshelf and things like that. And then he turns a corner, and there's a TV there with the original PlayStation in front of it. And so he walks over, and then the little VR hand pops out. He presses the open button. Or no, first he grabs a disc off the bookshelf, opens up a PlayStation disc, pulls out the disc. It's all scratched up. So he rubs it on his shirt.
Nice.
Then he opens the PlayStation, puts it in the PlayStation, closes it. And while it's booting up, he turns off his lights and gets his controller. So like, no joke. So like the whole scenario, you could, in essence, download that game and just play it. You put on your headset, you choose the game. But the whole simulator now is he's going to a bedroom, putting it in a PlayStation, turning off the lights, playing it in his room, in his room, right? So part of me loves it because I think there is something to be said about that factor of gaming, like whatever it may be. Or you can even say
you
like,
could go into your room in real life and play the game.
Yeah. And when also like, I remember I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was just saying, because I was like, man, the future is VR gaming. The future is like mapping out your room and stuff like that. And he's like, I think it's gonna be cool. He said, but there's so much of the culture of gaming that is sitting on a couch next to a buddy, having your controller, like the tactile feel of it, but also you're immersed in the moment. You're kind of in your zone, in your space. And what this does, it doesn't replace that, but it kind of, you can't go back to 1999 and pop in a game in a normal PlayStation. Like you could have a normal PlayStation, you could have an old school TV, you could have all these things, but like that's not your childhood bedroom. Like that's not the certain things that you remember from that experience. And so being able to recreate that experience and dive back into it's super cool. And I think too, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the book and movie Ready Player One.
You've talked about it.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the warnings of these VR worlds is that this is what it can become. But one of the things in there was there's a hangout spot called H's Basement where everybody goes and hangs out in this basement, and there's magazines you can go pick up and read. It's all VR world. You can go pick up and read magazines. You can pop in a game. They had an Atari. They had a Nintendo 64, and they would be like, hey, man, I'm going to beat you on Smash Brothers today. And they would go sit on the couch. All fake world, right? But they're playing a video game within a video game. And it's super cool to think that the technology is
the 13th floor
there. But
Inception.
It's also terrifying because the technology is there. And if you look at like all of these, for lack of a better way of saying it, like warnings of like sci-fi for the past 50 to 70 years, like they basically saying like nobody's paying attention to. Like if we get to this point where people are able to completely ignore the world around them and be completely submerged into this, there can be drastic changes just in the course of humanity, in the course of society.
San Francisco approved to have police dogs with guns that are robots.
Yeah, that's full on Black Mirror.
I mean, it's
the robots that
the dog police robot things.
Well, yeah, and there's like and if they feel threatened, they can kill.
Which and who defines that? Like,
well, I mean, it's like literally nobody's paid attention at all to the warnings.
All these different warnings. Yeah,
I've always been at this place though with like technology. Technology is a venue or it's not the technology is not the issue. It's how we use technology.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's maybe a different perspective on that people have is like they always blame the technology.
Yeah,
and it's not the technology. It's what we use the technology.
Absolutely. For. Yeah. So I think that, and I don't ever think that the people who are selling these things or promoting these things are ever going to necessarily put mental health as a top priority or training people how to use it in their everyday life as a top priority.
Right.
Because the goal is to get more people there to see the advertisements, to be in that world so they can make money. Like I get that. That's every business ever. Like you want people to buy from you. You want people to be with you.
Like we know.
Yeah.
Well, we know that it's possible for most vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, to get way better gas mileage than they do right now. Exemplified by the fact that you can put chips in certain vehicles to recode the computer. It just, what they do is that it voids your warranty. So it's like, it's proving that, like, to your point, it could do better, but this is about...
It's about money.
About money. Honestly, business. You know where I see that playing out even more now? Is all the, like the green energy stuff.
Oh yeah. People are just taking on to that.
Yeah. So it's so they've so convinced people that climate change exists. Although I just saw a chart that said that over the last 8 years, the world has cooled by like 11% or something.
Oh wow.
Or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, but
And now we're gonna pump all these batteries into the
right,
dumps.
right. You sell people this climate change idea, and now you're able to sell them green energy products when actually the products probably aren't that green.
Yeah.
Overall, comparatively to other things. So it's like it's never the technology; it's the people behind the technology
Absolutely.
that make it
Absolutely.
ridiculous.
So personally,
The tech has a lot of cool implications too. Anyway.
oh, absolutely. So personally, I will probably design a bedroom and go play GoldenEye with some buddies on a couch. Like that sounds like a ton of fun. But I want to be hyper aware of like not going to make my entire life my 1990s bedroom because that. And also, I didn't get into depression and stuff like that, but a lot of people, that's where they find like their safe space. It's really a big deal for like millennials and stuff as well, because there's like the most nostalgic generation they've found like statistically. And so I'm scared for people that are just going to numb themselves in this type of technology. But
you mean like how they treat social media?
That's the thing. Yeah. Is that we're already there. Like, is that people have been numbing themselves forever.
I feel like it's on purpose.
Yeah.
Like that there's an agenda.
And it's
more like, the fact that we have to have government hearings on whether or not Twitter and Facebook and Instagram can do what they do, and I forget how they said it. It's like because the number of people that use it, it's considered to some degree some kind of like public thing, even though it's a private company. Like the fact that we're having those conversations just shows the influence that those companies have now on culture of the world as a whole.
Yeah,
and it feels on purpose to me, like that. There's people. We're moving towards making people be dependent on those things. Like China, you can't, as far as I understand, you can't leave your house without your phone because they actually implemented the social credit score thing. So like if you leave your house without your phone, you can get like you either have to go back or you can get arrested or something like that. And that way people that are around you can know like, well, this person, has a bad credit score. So avoid them. And
wow. So we just celebrated the 100th episode, but so by the time we get to Simpler 200, I bet my tone's going to be changing and shaped a little bit differently.
I still don't think it's the technology's fault is my point. Like,
no, yeah.
Like you could have social media and you could have a cell phone and not be engaged in any of those things.
Absolutely.
Now, if the U.S. government's like, you have to carry your phone around because for your social credit score, that's when I'm going to shoot the giant middle finger to them and be like, get my flip phone back out.
That's right. And then we're really living in the 90s. Yeah. Ryan, what are we talking about today, man?
Today, we are talking about parenting and godly parenting. What does it look like? How do we do it? Why do we even have kids? That kind of stuff.
But Ryan, since I'm a real parent now, I think I should just take charge of this entire episode. I think I got it.
Pierce, go for it.
Do it.
No.
I think so. I've just realized this. We just recently added Aiden onto our car insurance.
Dope.
Oof,
and
that's expensive. Isn't
it? It's going to be almost $200 a month extra.
Yeah.
To have him on, but someone made this point to me, and so we're like,
and how much did it go up a year ago when you had to add Seth?
About $200.
Yeah.
Someone was like, I bet you're paying less or about equivalent to what you were paying for diapers and formula.
Oh, there you go.
And I was like,
okay.
That's a good way to look at it.
They're probably right. Now it was for multiple kids.
Yeah.
So it's still cheaper now or cheaper than with 2 kids with diapers and formula. But point being, like maybe we're at a similar point in life just of the cost.
Well, and the good news is you've got a few years now, Micah, before your next one's driving. So you can have a little bit of a break.
Right.
Yeah. So parenting is an interesting topic. I think just kind of as a general rule, like most kids growing up say, well, I'm going to do things different than my parents did. And I haven't ever really met anybody, like even people who came from really good homes, godly homes, or what they would call godly homes, Christian homes. I haven't met anybody who's ever been like, I'm going to do it 100% the way my parents did it. I haven't ever. And like even people who love their parents and have good relationships with their parents. And so I think that all of us have some sort of an idea of our childhood where we're like, I would do this different. I would like this to be done different. And I think that approach is a little bit dangerous in the sense that it's reactionary.
Yeah.
So we are looking at what our parents did and the things that preferentially we liked or didn't like, and we're going to figure out the kind of parent we're going to be based on that.
Yeah.
Instead of going, okay, as a Christian, what does it look like to raise godly children?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are two different discussions, or potentially two different discussions. They might not always be. There might be some overlap there.
Right.
But I have often said that that I am in large part the kind of husband and father that I am because of the kind of husband and father my dad was. And I've said that,
which is reactionary.
right? That yeah, exactly. That basically I looked at everything my dad was as a husband and a father, and I was like, I don't want to be anything like him. And so like I went the other way.
Do you think that there's some benefit in that?
Oh yeah,
into being somewhat reactionary?
I do. I think the problem is that when we allow the reaction to shape our belief system, like, look,
I got you.
So one of the things you've said, Micah, forever, and it took me a while to come to. I mean, I've been there now for a few years, but like you'd say stuff like, I don't think that being frustrated is the problem. I don't think that, necessarily being angry about something is the problem. Like we as people have a reaction.
Right.
What we have to do is shape that reaction in light of Jesus. And so I don't think having a reaction to my dad being a crappy father, that's not sin. That's not wrong. What I need to do then is go, okay, but don't reframe yourself to be opposite of Dan. That's my dad's name, in case you couldn't put those two together. And
it was your dad's name.
Yeah.
Or you just couldn't pronounce dad growing up, so it was Dan.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan.
I had a lisp.
You call him Danny?
Yeah. Careful. No. So I can't say that. It's too embarrassing. But no, but if my whole purpose is to not be my father, then my purpose isn't at the same time to be like Jesus.
Yep.
And that's the problem.
Yeah,
So,
what you're saying is like our tendency is to just be reactionary when really what we need is we need to have the premise as parents of our goal of raising godly children.
yeah.
And then if that's the premise, we're allowed to be reactionary to some degree because then it's filtered through the premise rather than the reaction being the premise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting how I did a Facebook post a few weeks ago, and I was just talking about like when you're a kid, you grow up and you're taught don't speak unless you're spoken to. The adults are talking now. You're not allowed to talk. You're going to sit there until you clean your plate. Like all these kinds of rules that are given that, and somebody responded to it and said, we did all that out of love. And they said discipline is loving. And then they later said, if discipline's not done in love, it's abuse. And I was like, okay, discipline is love or discipline could be love. Like,
That's strange.
Yeah, it was weird. But one of the things that was interesting is I didn't respond. I wanted to so badly because the person said, we as teachers and parents, we gave you all these rules as kids to make you responsible adults. And I wanted so badly to write her back and go, well, when's the last time you've had to ask permission to pee?
Yeah.
Or when's the last time someone told you you need to clean your plate?
Yeah.
Like if these are signs of responsible adults, then you would think that you're still doing it as an adult.
Yeah.
And so we give these rules to control. And now I don't think all control is bad. If you're a teacher, if every kid is talking at the same time, that doesn't work in that environment. And so there needs to be a I don't know, like some, what's the word that I want? There needs to be a little bit of control in that environment. But that's to control the environment, but not to, like, I don't know.
I still think you could have that conversation if your premise is to raise kids that love Jesus.
Yeah.
Because it might look different. So
Right.
contextually, so if, for example, in the Philippines, they don't usually use knives.
For dinner
Like,
or
sorry,
just
for,
in
like,
general? Or
food.
what?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But they actually do, like, they're really good at fighting with knives. So.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But like for like eating, they'll usually use a fork and a spoon.
Sure.
So if you took a kid from the Philippines and said, I'm going to teach you how to be American, then you have to train them that way. If you're taking American instead, I'm going to teach you how to be in the Philippines. So it's contextually driven. So
Absolutely.
like I took a etiquette class. Well, I took a business class in college, and we did a little section on etiquette. And you could say, like, if I was going to be in high society where I was going to go to these dinners all the time, it makes sense to learn etiquette in that way. But for most people, they're rarely going to eat, if ever, in an environment where, you have to learn how to use the utensils the correct way. So that's what I mean. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong to teach my kid a certain kind of etiquette.
Yeah.
As long as the premise is right. Now, I think what happens is if the premise is right, and I say, I would just want to teach my kids to love Jesus, to be godly kids who live their lives for the glory of Jesus, then I'm allowed to like start doing those, whatever you call them, like control situations, kind of how I feel like I should lead them. Now, you could talk. I think this is the benefit of parenting in a community like a local church is you're able to ask questions of other parents and have influence on each other in
Sure.
terms of like asking questions. Like the clean the plate thing, I believe, I might be wrong on this, but I believe is a carryover from the Great Depression.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
And so
here we are 100 years
and
later.
they're still doing it, right?
Yeah.
My guess is it probably wasn't. I mean, it's probably more, maybe even farther back. It was probably a thing of like poverty where
Yeah.
you couldn't waste your food. But to your point, like how many
I
times
think
do we
you're
go to-
100% right on that.
So in that, it's just because my parents taught me and their parents taught them and their
Yep.
parents taught them that I'm still doing it today.
Yeah.
It's like the story about the ham where
Yes.
they
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
the ends off the ham, and it's just because the grandma or great grandma had a pan that was too small to fit the ham. Like,
Yeah.
instead of asking questions, we just start doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go off the rails for just a second. I have a new thought that kind of goes in the direction you're talking about with the control thing. I've heard a lot of parents in the last, I don't know, 10 plus years, 10 to 12, 15 years, say something like this. My kid does not tend towards athletics, so I'm not going to put them in sports. I think what they mean is my kid doesn't have the tendency of other kids who seem to be more athletic, so I'm not going to put them in an organized recreational sport.
Yeah.
Totally down with that. Here's why I think they actually are wrong. If you take two boys or two girls outside and they both pick up sticks and start fighting with sticks like swords, they've actually just engaged in some form of sport.
Sure.
I think there is an innate sense of kids where like that kind of activity, call it whatever you want, but it's some kind of like engagement with somebody else in terms of like, I'm going to win. I mean, nobody fights
There's
with sticks.
competition. Yeah.
And when they're like, oh, let's just both get a trophy. They're arguing over who wins. You know what I mean?
My
Like,
boys with a little Nerf football will play on the trampoline for an hour and a half, where one person has to try to get from one side of the trampoline
Without
to the
getting
other
hit.
without getting tackled.
yeah. Oh,
and they'll do that. They'll do that for an hour.
right.
You know,
And you don't
it's-
have to be athletic. That's what I mean.
Right.
So here's what I think has happened in terms of control. I think there are some parents who have said, probably in a response to either how they grew up or how they saw other parents do their crazy organized recreational sport thing where they're just like traveling all the time.
all the time. Yeah.
So in a response to that, in reaction to that, they say, I don't want to do that, so my kids aren't going to be involved in sports. And they almost rob their kids of an innate desire to be engaged in some kind of sport activity because their perspective is that way. So this is where I think it helps, is to say, my premise is that my kids as believers love and honor Jesus with their life.
Yes.
Like that's my goal, to teach them. And then I'm able to, like, instead of making hardline stances like my kids aren't going to be involved in sports, you might say my kid tends more towards music or some kind of arts and they're less interested in sports. And so instead of saying you're not going to be involved in sports, you don't make that rule. You just say, let's encourage the things that you enjoy, instead of, I don't understand why it has to be, if my kid's artistic, they cannot be athletic.
Right.
It's just a dumb perspective. I think
I'm
all that-
artistic, but I'm not athletic.
all that to say, but you do like workout and you swim, but all that to say, I think what our tendency is we forget the premise and we go straight for the reaction.
Yes.
And then we end up hurting our kids in the long run because they're having to grow up going, wait a minute, either my parents said I couldn't be involved in sports, or my parents made me play sports and I hated it.
Yeah.
And so then you continue the reaction. I think what we're saying is parents right now can stop that chain, or like limit that chain of reaction by saying, here's the premise, and then just kind of be more free flowing.
Yeah.
Well, in the rest of the parts of life.
If we're not guided as parents by reaction, but guided by my aim is Jesus in my home, it does change things. So like one of the things that I realized, my son Asher, he's in FFA this year. It was he has an elective class.
Wasn't that a Christian band back in the 90s?
I don't know. FFA 4, FF, I don't know.
FFH, I think it was far
Something.
from home.
Yeah. Sorry. But he
Was it FFA is what, Future Farmers of America?
yeah. So it was his second choice. He had picked engineering, but the engineering class had a smaller group this year, so he didn't get it. And so he was in FFA, wanted to raise some rabbits for it and whatever. And I was like, great. And so we had a talk the other day. He's 13, and he's 13, man. And like, I'm like, hey, how are your rabbits doing? Hey, have you, because he had a stock show like a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday. And I was like, do you know how to show them? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Do you know? And he was like, was like, y'all aren't talking about that in class? And he goes, nope. I was like, you know that it's this Saturday? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, have you not looked up any YouTube videos? Have you not and I was frustrated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it dawned on me, he's 13 and I'm the adult. I know it's coming. Like I should have trained him. Like I should have
helped him through it.
Yeah. I should have been able to say, hey, I should have 3 weeks earlier gone, hey, have you looked at any of those videos? Well, hey, let's see if we can find some and I'll set you up. You know what I mean? Because he's 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're saying your expectation was that he knew how to problem solve.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we do that a lot to kids. We expect them to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I can't tell you how many times I heard that growing up, figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Which I don't have a problem with if you set them on the right path.
correct.
Like
Absolutely.
give them the direction, say, hey, I found these YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to send these to your phone. Watch these videos.
Yes.
Figure it out.
But like he's 13 and I'm going, okay, have I trained him how to do that? Like, why am I throwing him in the deep end? And I know some parents are listening right now going, that's how you do it. Because your parents threw you in the deep end. They're like, hold this rock. Splash.
Well, I like the idea of learning through failure.
I do too.
But I think what you're saying is so true. You can't do something if you have no premise of how to do it. Like,
Absolutely.
failure in terms of your situation with Asher would be like, I've helped you get like a good solid foundation of what it's supposed to be, and then giving you the freedom to figure out how you want to do it.
So when we were renovating the church building, there are so many things that you know how to do that I don't know how to do. And so when we were cutting angles with the saw and, doing all this, like you had to tell me how to cut the angles on those things. Cause I didn't know. And I was a 44-year-old man, but I hadn't ever done it.
That's a great point. Yeah.
You know? And so you didn't go, hey, Ryan, figure it out.
Now our church would look so bad.
You showed me how to do it.
Yeah.
And then after that, you said, now work it out. Like, I'm going to go do this other thing.
Yep.
I need you to be responsible for this
Yeah.
while I'm doing this other thing. So
and you probably made some bad cuts and figured out I need to change
and I
the cut.
did.
Yeah.
But you still gave me the resources to be able to start.
Right.
And I don't think we do that very often with kids.
Yeah, that's a different perspective of parenting, of actually saying, I want to teach my kid how to succeed.
Yeah.
Rather than just letting them figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
Like literally, I think for my boys, the biggest thing I hope to invest in them as followers of Jesus is to live their lives for the glory of God.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Secondary to that, literally all I want to teach them is like how to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Because I think if you learn how to troubleshoot, how to figure it out from like the
you can
premise,
navigate a lot of things
you can
in
literally
life.
almost do anything you want to do in life.
Well, the day before the show arrived, and it's funny because I had been I think a bad parent about a week earlier, and I was just like talking to both of my boys about they don't have any follow through. Like they decide they want to do something, and they don't follow through with it. And then it dawned on me, I am talking to a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was 12 and 13, I wanted to do something this week and a completely different thing the next week.
Yeah.
And I'm a 47-year-old man who, you guys can gauge this, but I feel like I have some inherent self-discipline. Like I feel like there are a lot of areas in my life that I'm very self-disciplined in.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last year, I would say that even more so. Like I feel more driven right now, more directionally, and I realized that because I'm more driven and I know the direction I want to go and I'm more intentional with my time, I suddenly expected my 12 and 13-year-old boys to be there with me.
Interesting.
Instead of letting them be kids who have to figure out what their direction is. And I had to ask myself, Ryan, do you really care that Asher is driven with rabbits? Or to your point, Micah, do I care that my son know and honor Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And so the day before the deal, I looked at Asher and I said, so we talked to your teacher today. This thing tomorrow does not impact your grade at all. Like you don't have to go. And I was like, I'm leaving it in your court. And I said, Mom and Dad do not care. There is not a decision that you will make that will make us more proud or disappointed or anything. This is up to you. And he said, can I think about it? I said, sure. So an hour later, we were on date night and he was with his cousins at their grandmother's. An hour later, he texted me. He goes, I think this will be a good experience for me. I said, great. And so there was one other issue. I said, we need to weigh your rabbit when you get home because if it's over 4 pounds, it's disqualified. And so he weighed his rabbit and it was 5 pounds.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, so your teacher says that there's the chance they won't even weigh it. So you might still be able to show it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but you've got another show in February and another one in March. And I said, so think about it. And he goes, okay. So he thought about it and he came back to me. He goes, look, we need to start exercising the rabbit more.
So he's taking ownership now.
Yep. We need to start exercising the rabbit more. I need to reduce its food. Let's get him to wait for the February show. And I'll work better on grooming him and stuff. And let's not go tomorrow and let me put some more. And all of that was his call. And so I was like, that's awesome, dude. Okay, that sounds good. That's a plan. We've got a plan, you know? And so I said, how do I help you with that? I said, what do you need from me to help you with that? You know? And so we talked about that because I'm not going to be like, you're 13, you better get it. Like, I'm your dad, dude. And what's super sucky is in 4.5 years, if he goes to college somewhere else, he's gone. We have 4.5 more years with this kid under our roof, theoretically, right? And so like, I'm going, I don't want to miss these opportunities to teach him. And so the weekend ended and he was getting ready to go back to school. And I was like, listen, your teacher is a sweetheart. She's a really nice lady. I don't think she's going to give you a hard time that you didn't go because it was voluntary. And there was a basketball tournament that weekend. A lot of kids who were in FFA weren't at this thing. And I said, but here's what I need you to remember. Like if she says, well, why weren't you there? I said, I don't need you to feel guilty. I want to ask you 3 questions. Does it change your grade at all? And he goes, no. I was like, so we don't care about that. I said, does it change how mom and dad feel about you? And he goes, no. I was like, so we're not worried about that. And I said, and the most important thing is, does it change who you are before the Lord? And he goes, no. I was like, so we're good. Like, I want you to take ownership of this, that like, if it doesn't change our perspective of Christ, if it doesn't shape Jesus, then it doesn't have to shape you, you know? And so like trying to help always remind him that this life is about
You're trying to, it's funny because I think this is a good part of you that's reactionary. Like you didn't get that.
Yeah.
So like what you've realized is what's been important and the biggest growth for you has been understanding who you are in Christ, that your identity rests in him.
Yeah.
And while we would say that across the board for all parents, that's an incredible premise, there is a part of you that is reactionary in a positive way.
For sure.
And so I think that's what I was saying earlier, is like there are some things that like you feel that probably more emotionally than I do, even though we share the same perspective on that.
Agreed.
And so I think that's where it's what I'm trying to say, I guess, is parents need to give themselves a little break. Like when you feel the tension of like, I didn't feel this and I didn't have this when I was growing up from my parents, but this is an incredible foundation. Don't feel bad that that's reactionary.
Right.
As long as your premise is set as Jesus, then let those things flow. And then if you're worried about it, talk it out with people. Like, does this feel like I'm just reacting to how I grew up? Because I think it's important for your kids to as well know, like, here's how I grew up. Mine was like not as intense as yours, but like my dad wouldn't let me get my hair cut like I wanted. Didn't want me to wear bracelets or anklets or anything like that. And it was always this like super legalistic perspective on that stuff. And reactionary for me is I really could give a crap how my kids cut their hair. Like literally, if they're like, hey dad, can I do this? I'm like, if that's what you want to do. Maybe with some caveats now. Like if my kids say, Dad, can I dye my hair pink or purple? I'm going to say this is probably conveying the wrong message in a woke culture.
Even there, like there's the intentionality with it. You're not like this, no, I'm not going to have a son that does that. You're talking through it. You're just
there's a reason. It's not like because I don't like it. Because I don't really care if it's pink or purple. But I think now it's conveying the wrong thing because that has become a
statement.
Some caveats. But I think sometimes I think that the parents I talk to are so worried about being good parents that they don't allow themselves some grace in the midst of it. So set your premise and foundation as like, I want to teach my kids. I want to raise up. I think you could take it from the same perspective. It's not exactly what Paul was telling Timothy, but the same perspective of like older men and older women teach the younger men and younger women. That same heart of like, I want to invest into my kids to teach them to be good followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
If that's your premise, then give yourself some breaks as you go through that.
Well, and I think too that what I was raised with was the way that you raise godly kids is you make them memorize the scripture and you have a Bible study with them every week or maybe every morning before school or maybe every night before bed. And I'm not going to say that those are bad things. I'm going to say that those are not the things that are going to those will probably not engage the biggest change in your kids. It's not that they're not positive. Like it's so funny how many people will say, well, Ryan said, don't read the Bible. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so that it used to be funny. Now it just ticks me off. But like Michelle and I, we will, when we have a financial need in our home, we'll sit down with the kids and we will pray with them for this financial need. We let them know that we have that financial need because Michelle and I are super confident that God's going to meet that need. And then we want to be able to sit down with the kids and say, look, remember how we prayed about this last week? Look at what God did. And then we thank God for that. And when I love preaching, I love ministry. The hardest part for ministry for me is I feel deeply the brokenness of the people that I'm ministering to. And so there are days that I just feel sad. I'm just sad. And instead of just being sad and moping around the house, I'll get my family together and I was like, look, guys, there's just sin and there's sorrow and there's sadness in the world. And I'm trying the best that I can to point people to Jesus. And let's just pray that. And I don't have to tell them everybody's story. We just pray generally. And I'm like, look, God, we just pray for the people in our church, pray for the people in our community. And so we're teaching our kids that in everything we do, we're trying to reflect on Jesus. We're trying to consider who Christ is. We're trying, that's one of our aims in the Dalglish household.
I think I just realized, I think I've done something bad as a reaction, as a parent. Bad is probably too strong of a word. Like, I think I've done something I think I'd like to change. I'm changing, being transparent, like as we're recording this. I hated the discipline that I was taught growing up of like spiritual discipline. And I think I hated it partly because I've always had this innate sense of like, I want to be true to the word. I want to be true to the scriptures, even when I was a kid. And I never saw it. And was always shot down when I asked hard questions about the disciplines part of it. And so I think I just realized as a reactionary, I think what I've done as a parent is I've completely stripped anything out of my household that looks like that at all. So here's my thought. Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't think the best thing to do for every single kid is to say, memorize the scripture. Although I do think that some kids would really learn the scripture that way. Maybe not memorizing in the terms of like how we grew up memorizing, but just like.
Well, the problem is often we're asking them to memorize it without any understanding of context.
Right. So like, let's read through this book and like learn it together. But here's my thought. Like, maybe there's some benefit in like asking my kids, all of us, to say like, hey, we're together as a family, maybe in different parts of the house every day, going to take like 10 minutes by ourselves. And like, I'm just reflecting on the things that God has done today. Not as a discipline, but as a moment to just remember. I'm thinking at it from a parent's perspective. So like, my reaction is I hate it because it creates this discipline. But maybe that perspective is actually stripping them, my kids, of the opportunity
to be athletes,
but just to be like, I think the flip of it is the reaction for me is that my kids possibly could grow up without any perspective of like, I can tell them all I want, let your life wholly be focused on glorifying Jesus. But like your point about Asher with the rabbits, I can't expect that my kids as teenagers and preteens have that figured out yet. So maybe there's a part of that where I need to actually help them learn what that looks like. And everybody's different. Like I will never be, in my personality, I will never be the healthiest when I'm going through someone else's disciplines.
Right.
But I am the healthiest when I just do it my own way. That might not be the case for all of my kids. Maybe like you do better, Ryan, when you have like your day planned out.
Oh, for sure.
So like, that's my point, is like, maybe I've robbed them of that by reacting so intensely to it. So how I was raised.
Well, and that it's been a struggle for me because Bible reading is very important, I think, and it is a super important part of my life. And so I want that for my kids because I see how it's changed me. But one of the things that I realize, and we've talked about this for 20 years now, Micah, the community that we've had and the conversations that we've had in Pierce now for the last decade or so, like this has been more impactful. Like
talking it out.
And so what I do is, because I read, somebody's going to be like, oh, he doesn't read every day. I read Monday through Friday. Those are my reading days.
You're such a sinner.
Wow. I know. And I talk a lot about my reading in front of the kids, and it's not always to them. Sometimes it's to Michelle in front of the kids, like on purpose. So that they can be like, oh, this is the thing I'm learning, or this is the thing that I learned, or man, I read a new thing today. And trying to shape that for them. My boys have a 3-volume, it's the Kingstone Bible, I think. It's a graphic novel Bible. There's one that's just a single version. a single volume, but this one's 3 volumes. It covers a lot more of the scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought it for the boys last year.
Kingstone?
I think so. Yeah. And it's 3 volumes. It's $60 on Amazon, 3-volume hardback, big books.
Mm-hmm.
And my attitude is like, dude, if I had that when I was 13, I would have loved that.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I bought that for them because they're more apt to read that probably than they are to go pick up a book and start reading Leviticus or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they're still getting the narrative of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's still narrative, and they're still seeing about the adventures of Paul and the miracles of Jesus, and even Revelation is illustrated really beautifully. Kind of scary, honestly. So like for little kids, maybe not Revelation, but
Dude, I just looked this up. That looks dope.
dude, it's so stinking cool.
I'm
And
gonna order that today.
and so you know how people say readers are leaders, that old thing. I think learners are leaders. So like however
I always
you learn.
want to ask, like, what about tribes that don't have
I know.
a language
They
written?
don't have a leader.
But
I know the intention is. I just hate freaking absolute statements
I
that
know.
like
So-
you can't back up.
so that's
You
why
should say good leaders should read.
I've changed it to learners are leaders. Like,
There you go.
like
Absolutely.
because people who are learning, like it just changes things. And so I've incentivized my kids, and I'm paying them $5 a book that they read. It has to be at least 20,000 words, and the max that they can make a month is $20. So and Asher's like, dope. he's like,
Can I sign up for that service too?
Yeah. Audiobooks don't count, Pierce.
That's rude, man.
I was going to say, man, I would never get paid unless it's going to do audiobooks.
and so
I do intake a lot of audiobooks.
I know you do. Yeah, for sure. And you learn that way. Like,
I do. I learn
don't learn
auditory.
that way.
I do better in college in the classes that were lecture classes than I did in the ones where you got to read the chapter.
I don't learn well that way, but it's been really interesting because just trying to help my kids, what you're saying, Micah, like help my kids develop these kinds of desires and disciplines.
Ooh, okay. What if you left out the discipline
And desire, and just said desire?
because maybe for some of them it turns into discipline and maybe for some of them it doesn't. Because I think what we tend to do in Christianity is we have an idea of what spiritual discipline looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone could come to me, if they were comparing me to you guys, they would probably say Ryan and Pierce are more disciplined in their spiritual life than you are in terms of that definition. Like
visibly.
Well, that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
I'm not talking about an actual
No.
conversation. The Christian tendency and perspective of
Based off
spiritual
of their
disciplines.
standard. Yeah.
Yeah, they would definitely look at you and go, Ryan's more disciplined.
Yeah.
And if that's the standard, then I would say 100% yes. Now, here's the question I would ask. Why is the discipline the goal?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It can't
Someone could ask, like, are you growing in Christ? If we were trying to do comparisons, are you growing in Christ the same way Ryan is?
Yeah.
Or that's the wrong way to say it. Because no, Ryan reads a whole lot more than I do. In fact, I just realized I lost dude, I sucked in 2022 so bad. I was such a sinner. I think I only got through like 3, maybe a little less than 3/4 of my what's it called? Through the Bible in order. What's that called? Chronological.
Yeah.
Wow, slacker.
I know.
Wow.
What's funny is I feel like I listen to it a lot. So maybe it's off. But like sometimes, some days I'd listen for like 3 hours. So I don't know how. Maybe it was just like some of the travels.
Leviticus takes a
It
long
does take a
time
long
to get
time.
through. It just feels like 3 hours.
So, but no, we're not growing the same way. But to your point,
We're growing.
what you said
growing.
earlier is we're growing because we are intaking.
Desire, man. We have
It's a desire. I want to know God.
Yeah.
And so that might look a little different than your Monday through Friday reading plan. You and I probably are a little bit more similar in like our auditory learning, Pierce. The point is that we're learning and growing. What I hate and still hate is that there's this weird standard that somebody said a long time ago that if I don't read my Bible every day,
Right.
Yeah.
so I'm this awful person. So it's like if us three spent a day and we literally were on like a retreat and literally didn't open the scriptures once, but we talked about it all day long.
Yeah.
Someone
So
would go, you guys didn't do the right thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it goes back to what I forget how you defined it earlier. the reactionary, putting the discipline. So what they hear is read the Bible every day, and the emphasis therefore is on the read instead of the importance of the scripture.
Maybe to your point, the learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So like it could have been completely well intentioned of like guys, like maybe at the very beginning of the Gutenberg press and stuff, like we have the Bible.
Yeah,
like you have this,
point.
like you can be in the Word every day. You now have the availability.
It started before that. It started with the Paris Bible in the late 12th or early 13th century.
Dope.
And it was called the Paris Bible because they realized that there was a bigger demand for the Bible. And so they had a whole bunch of scribes that were hired to strictly make hand copies of the Bible. And so the first...
But did they read it?
Yeah. The first kind of mass production of the Bible was considered the Paris Bible.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was...
Is that where they were, or is it just...
Yeah.
okay.
And so it was being distributed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Gutenberg press, right? And then the Bible became accessible.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until like the 14th, 15th century that the idea of a personal quiet time even existed.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it didn't even exist.
As far as reading.
Yeah.
Because I think you could...
I know, but our cultural view of a personal quiet time. Yeah. So like that, an individual, put it this way, the idea of an individual studying the Bible did not exist until the 14th, 15th century.
Right.
Yeah.
What existed was a community of believers discussing the things of God. That existed. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've missed that in our families.
Absolutely.
And so we tell our kids, go read your Bible.
That's an interesting take.
We tell our kids, go read your Bible, and we don't have the conversation.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm feeling. Like maybe because we don't have that on a consistent basis. I'm not even saying
don't have what?
Like the
conversation
on it's more like organic, like as it comes up. But maybe there should be more opportunity for that. Like maybe I should create more opportunity for that. I'm not saying that I'm telling them we have to talk about this today, but like creating an opportunity, an environment where we can talk about the things,
Bible.
Yeah, the things God's been, or even just like I'm realizing all these things I don't do all of a sudden as we're talking about this. Like I love asking questions, and I think it's a great way to learn is ask questions. Like I don't even think I open up an environment for my kids to like be able to go, okay, wait, what about this? Like, and maybe that's healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe that as a parent, maybe I've reacted so much to my distaste of the disciplines and the way it was taught me that I've negated. Maybe I associate that with a discipline rather than, like you were saying earlier, an opportunity to set a good foundation for my kids.
Yeah.
Well,
I would say, I think that what you're saying in regards to that, I think it's unbelievably healthy because what you would say, we would all say that we want our children to ask questions, to ask the tough questions, to see the growth. And going back to kind of the whole rabbit thing is that you're putting them in a situation where they are 100% safe because they're asking questions to you. They're asking questions to the person who's mainly training them, who's discipling them, who's leading them up. And that way, the first time they're ever asking questions isn't with some Calvinistic douchebag in college whenever they're out of the house. No offense towards you Calvinistic douchebags. But yeah, you've then therefore trained what that looks like how that growth can look like. And then when they're confronted in that situation, their first reaction isn't, oh, I shouldn't ask questions. Their first reaction is, well, that guy was kind of a douchebag.
Right.
I would cut you off a second ago, but I'm going to keep going if you're cool with it.
No, please.
One of the two things that thinking about like the last 3 years with Riley, she'll be 3 in May. There's been a couple of things you guys have brought up. Obviously, setting the premise of what our household is going to be. It's going to be centered around the gospel. And so there's that premise. And there's also just the level of intentionality with that. I think that we have discussed disciplines and things. We have discussed, but one of the biggest things I've learned from you, Mike, really just working on the bathrooms a lot over the past year, we had a lot of parenting discussions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really honed in, which also side note, like the community aspect of that was brilliant. Like, I don't know what it was about me. It wasn't that I was scared to ask questions to you guys. It was just, I don't know if it's a cultural thing of like, oh, I had this kid, now I'm in charge. Now I have to take care of it.
You're a real dad.
I'm a real dad. Yeah. So, but like being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know. And here's a guy who has 4 sons. Like, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out.
He might not know either. But.
Exactly. But we can talk about it. But what's great about it is the premise is still the same. We both want to lead our families in with the gospel as core. And so I can discuss that with my brother in Christ, who I've been friends with for a long time. And so, bringing like the community aspect was brilliant of just bringing that in. Also, side note, now with our second on the way, because of that growth and kind of that realizing that humility is needed in community. I have taken opportunities to talk to people who I know have multiple kids and be like, hey, you had a second child at one point. What was like what was it for you? Like, what was the big shift? Yeah. I ran into Dr. Drew the other day and I was like, man, you have 4 kids, right? I think he has like 5 or 6 now, I think.
6, I think.
Yeah. So I was like, oh gosh. So I was like, well, he was like, once you get past 3, it's kind of all the same. but I talked to him. So I was like, second one on the way, like, what is it? He talked a lot about
He's a psychologist.
Yeah,
too,
exactly.
and a teacher.
So he talked a lot about the social aspects and the social implications. He was like, it's great that Riley's 3 because there seems to be more of a statistically, like more of a nurturing type of mentality going into it, that like they understand more that this is a kid who needs to be cared of. I don't know if Riley will actually do that. But back to the intentionality as well. We right now do a nightly Bible reading, but me and Hannah have had the discussion that whenever Riley gets to a certain point, whatever that may be, it may be tomorrow, maybe when she's 4, like that might not be the best way that she learns. And so we might need to shape that and
or you
mold
might not be able to do that. Like that's honestly one of the hardest things about my kids getting older is that it's really difficult to set a schedule.
Well, yeah.
True.
You've got 2 boys that are in athletics
so
all the
much
time.
stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where that might be where my fault has been, is going, it wasn't possible to do it like on a consistent basis. So I don't do it.
Yeah.
Not
Instead
the Bible
of-
reading, but So I think, I'm
instead of like shaping with each season.
right.
Um,
I'm growing a lot through this conversation.
yeah. That's,
Well,
that's really encouraging. And so like, we're already kind of at a point with Riley where she's 2, but I'm never going to be like, the Lord can't work in a 2-year-old. Like that's silly.
right, sure.
But also like we'll start Bible reading time and it's like, for some reason, every night for the past like week, she's like, right now, Bible reading time, that's the time I got to fake cook. And so she'll just go to her kitchen and just start going to town, like cooking everything. And so like, we're also trying to teach her what it means to like, okay, we're learning together. So let's sit down. She does it at school. They have their dots to sit on and stuff like that. So we're just playing with these different things thinking, okay, how can she learn? Is it better to just scrap this and figure out what's next? Or if she does these types of things at school, should we get a dot for her to sit on? Maybe that'll help her just understand.
Well, if you want to do like a moralistic perspective of Christianity, just watch VeggieTales together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. Oh, VeggieTales.
So we used to watch this,
but it's so moralistic.
Oh yeah,
Watching it as a college student, because they came out when I was in college, was hilarious. It's so stinking fun.
We used to watch. I think it was called. It's a YouTube series, but I want to call it. No, it has like this. I forget what it's called. It's like Adventures in something.
Odyssey,
man.
But it's not Adventures in Odyssey. That's what I keep wanting to say.
I freaking loved Adventures in Odyssey.
I love me too, man. It was dope.
I probably would still love Adventures in Odyssey. I think I have the tapes somewhere still.
He did.
That's dope.
Dobson did some really great things.
Those were good.
Yeah.
I mean, like even if there was some moralistic stuff, it was
overall he did some
really
really things.
done
That's
well.
tight.
Yeah.
I remember watching the cartoon, The Adventures in Odyssey, growing up, but I never had the audiobooks and stuff. But with Riley, what was cool about that one, she doesn't watch that much anymore. It's very geared younger, but it's super cool because she'd go on this at the very beginning. She has these things that she has to collect. It's basically like Blue's Clues, but for Christians. So like
Dora?
there we go. So like she has 3 things she's got to go find. And so she begins to go on the map and she's like, oh, well, we got to learn about this in the Bible. Let's go talk to so-and-so from the Bible. And so they walk in and there's this guy with this huge book. And he's like, well, I just read a verse about that. So he teaches you the verse. And then after that, they respond to the verse by worshiping. And so they were like, let's sing praises to our God about this. And so then and like every time I watch it, Riley would like jump up on the carpet and be like, and just get really into it, dancing and stuff. Cool. So yeah, super cool. But also like, I don't think she would respond to that now maybe as much. And so just kind of being intentional with the growth of that and realizing the premise stays the same, but the actions or the reactions will look different. May it be for a 13-year-old versus a 2-year-old.
And the method by which we're doing those things. A couple of challenges because I know parents are listening to this going, man, you haven't told me how to raise godly kids. And so what we have continued to say is that the premise has to be Jesus, which if you're listening to our podcast for the 102nd time, why are you surprised? If you're brand new, you're like, what are these guys doing? But like the reality is that we are all to some degree, a product of our environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if you as parents are always frustrated, always angry, always short-tempered, always in a rush, the job's the most important, the grades are the most important. If you're kind of looking at the measure and the scope and the metric of what our world looks at, and that's what you're emphasizing the most at home, then that's what your kids are learning.
Yeah.
And if you can take the job and the grades and the fact that they didn't clear their plate and shape all of those through Jesus, Because the reality is you're going to have a job, or you're going to have to work on your grades, or you're going to have to go to school, or you're going to have the reality is all those other things exist. You're going to eat food from a plate at some point, like, but frame them through the lens of Christ.
Or maybe like to maybe make that
a
little more intense. Quit making those things the like focal point.
The goal. Yeah.
Because that's when you get frustrated.
Right. So Asher,
is it that big of a deal that your kid didn't clean their plate? Like, are you trying to teach them something?
Right.
Yes. So like implement it. And I'm not even opposed to saying like, I've asked you to do that. Now you're going to suffer a consequence.
Yeah.
What we're saying is don't let that affect you as a parent in such a way where it's causing you to be angry.
Absolutely,
Because the goal, like,
what's the goal?
Why are you more concerned?
Yeah.
Why are you more concerned about your kid learning discipline in that, but not loving Jesus with their entire life? And so it's like, I think it's a shift of perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's important to teach kids some social things. Like there's going to be things you have to use in a different context to discipline your kids over. That's just part of parenting.
Yeah.
Discipline's going to look different for every kid. That's something you and I have talked about, Pierce, a lot. Like I spanked my older kids, spanked Grayson a lot. That sucker was like angry. Well, I didn't know till later he was like super anxious. I had no idea, but I literally have never spanked Hayes once because I just like look at him and he like weeps. So like there's no need to spank him.
Right.
But I get we have to discipline our kids, but if the goal isn't to teach my kid in the context of their life or to use I don't think I have an issue with this right now, but to use this proverb like about the bent, I think there's some aspect of that you can understand, and like your Ryan tendency is going to be a schedule, right?
Oh yeah,
mine's
I
not.
love schedule.
So you might have a kid like Ryan and a kid like me, and so you can't do the same thing with Ryan and the same thing with me. There has to the parenting looks different for every kid.
For sure,
is my point. So whatever you take,
the three of us are very different people sitting at this table.
Yeah,
but the goals got to be the same.
And so like one of the things that I think is also important is we talk a lot. We have in just here and there about depression, identity, discouragement. You just mentioned Grayson and anxiety. Like we have the opportunity as parents to really shape how our children think about themselves in light of Christ. And I think that that's super important. Asher and I were working on some math homework the other night, and it was a problem that he should have known the answer to, but you could see that he got lost in his own head and got frustrated. And the more he got frustrated, he couldn't do it. And and he was looking at the paper and he was getting frustrated. And I said, stop. And I was cooking dinner. And I was like, look at me, like look in my face. I said, slow down. And because he knew that what he had worked out, he had done the first 2/3 of the math problem correctly. And he needed to know what 0.25 of an hour was. Now, I learned on a clock face, every clock he's ever had has been digital. You know what I mean?
I thought about that.
And so I looked at him and I said, how many minutes are in an hour? And he goes, 60. I was like, right. So divide that in half. What's half of that? He goes, 30. I was like, right. So what's half of that? He goes, 15. I was like, yeah. How many quarters in a dollar? 4. You just divided that into like, and he goes, oh yeah. And I was like,
so he just got locked in it.
Yep. And I looked him in the face and he looked back down to his paper and said, no, hold on. Look at me for a second. And I said, I need you to understand that sometimes our minds, when we can't see it right away, we get lost in all the messiness of it. And I said, I need you to learn that it's in there and to take a breath, take a pause, and don't allow the frustration to come in. Because once we get frustrated as people, a lot of times things get worse. So just take a beat and just think about it, and like just trying to shape even how he thinks. Because I could see him getting frustrated with himself that he couldn't get it. And then he was kind of self-deprecating. He was like, man, I can't believe I couldn't get that. I was like, no, look, everybody does that.
Yeah.
So don't let that frustration be the thing that shapes how you feel.
Right.
Like, and so trying to, now I didn't turn it to Christ in that moment, but like,
I don't think everything needs to be turned to Christ.
I don't think so either, but there's still an underlying principle that this frustration that you have, this doesn't shape who you are.
Yeah.
The fact that you couldn't get this,
Yeah, and on that point, I don't think every kid needs to hear that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably not.
I think that's what I'm saying is like, I don't think you can take a principle and apply it to every kid in those regards. Like or at least some kid needs to hear it more often than others.
Sure.
Maybe you can say it that way. So I think like for some kids, like Seth, for example, my oldest, I mean, I'm not sure he's going to be shaken by much.
Yeah.
Just he's just chill.
Yeah.
So there are going to be times in life when I have to say, dude, Your identity's in Jesus. It's okay.
Yeah.
Does it happen very often? No.
Not with him.
No.
Right. Yeah.
With Grayson, probably needs to happen a lot more.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So that's my point, is like, it doesn't have to be the same way
Right.
every time. Because I think what people are probably going to hear us say is, Ryan said this is a good idea. I should do this for every single
every
kid.
single situation, or every single situation. Like, but I think we have a beautiful opportunity when we can see that our kids are frustrated, or see that they feel anxious, and we can redirect that. Because I think a lot of times what parents do is exacerbate the situation.
Yeah.
And they're like,
You're stupid. Why can't you figure that out?
You're anxious? Well, you should be. You should have thought about studying for this test last week. But it's your fault that you're stressed about it now. Like we do those kinds of things a lot.
And there may be times when you have to do that.
Yeah.
Like if you
maybe in a different way, but still
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like that what you just did is reactionary.
Yeah.
Because of how you would have experienced it. I'm saying, like, what if that's actually what that particular kid needs in that moment?
Yeah.
What you're saying is that tends to be our first response.
Yeah.
Instead of setting the premise correctly for the identity in Christ. And
So
then
maybe
working
instead
from
of
there.
an evaluated response, like a measured response.
If you've asked them to study for their test, and you've helped them the entire semester and they refuse to do it, there's a point when you have to start going like, you should have done this, but your failure is
But
is
in
your
that
failure.
case, it's not a reactionary response, it's a calculated response.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is, like, I don't think you can say you have a reactionary response to that.
Yeah,
You
I have a
can't-
bias.
You can't take that and say that should never be part of parenting ever.
Yeah.
We the other day, I finally found a word that describes Riley with her sneakiness. I think a positive way to say it is she's resourceful. Like what she does, she figures out.
She's so
you can
shrewd.
see her work a room, like figure out the situation, and she knows like the quote unquote rules of like that we implement, that like my mom implements, her grandparents implement. And I can see her working. I think about the line in Jurassic Park too, like, well, they never attack one place twice. And so they're always problem solving. The raptors in Jurassic Park, if you don't know the
phrase
reference.
is when he says clever girl.
Clever girl, yeah. That's very much my daughter. So like, but the positive spin is she's resourceful. So what she does is she utilizes her resources to get to a certain goal. So that's helped the way that Hannah and I think about it. But the other day she really wanted a snack. And there's certain things that like she'll do as she wants a snack. One of the first things she does is she'll sneak over to the counter and climb on things until she gets up there. Usually we see her. She's not very good at that. And so we stop her and
she's not invisible.
She kind of has her fit, and then she'll go over there and she'll mess with the cabinet a little bit. And then she'll just walk around and she'll play a little bit. And we'll hear her go, I'm hungry. Like, do little things. So she has all these steps that I watch her do. And we have begun discussing with her, like at the very first thing that we saw, we were like, okay, well, we're going to eat in an hour or two. Mommy is when we were building that treadmill. Mommy and daddy are going to finish building this treadmill. Let's bring some toys in here. So we encouraged her, we brought some toys. And then she kind of did step 2 of that process. And we're like, hey, everything's okay. You're okay. We sat down, talked for a second. I was like, you don't have to worry about the food we're going to eat. Mommy and dad finished. I was like, do you want to come help mommy and daddy? Oh yeah, I want to do that. So she helped me screw in a couple screws, and then she kind of wandered away, played with the toys, and then she started doing stuff again. And so she went through she drained all of her resources. And then she walks in and Hannah's bent down screwing something, and I see her face contort, and she rears her fist back and punches Hannah in the back as hard as she can. And at that point, there was a reaction, but it was this, we have gotten to the point now where you're going to do that. And I said, no. And I said, you do not hit your mind. Like my tone changed there. Everything shifted, and her whole just dropped. And she looked at me and I was like, no, man, we are not going to do this. And Hannah by that point was already frustrated at the treadmill, and she had gotten punched by her daughter. So she was beginning to shut down. So I grabbed Riley and got her to the other room, and we began.
To say Hannah.
I had locked Riley in the room. I grabbed Hannah, got her out of there. I got Riley out, and we sat down, and I kept my voice firm like the entire time with that. But like it wasn't the second that she climbed to the counter, I was like, hey, it was, because there might be a time where I need to do that.
But in that case, that's not what was required in the first step.
Absolutely. So it's being intentional within that. And I think a lot of what you guys have said is like, it's also knowing your kids. Like if you're a parent that has the foundation of wanting to glorify the Lord in your household and see your kids grow and know Jesus and enjoy that, in the midst of that, you're also going to be getting to know your kids. I mean, everything you've listened. I mean, some people who don't really have kids might know, okay, well, my guy's 4 boys, they're probably kind of all the same, but you've had to approach all 4 of your boys differently.
They're all different.
Even when they're all adults, like you're going to interact with them differently. You're still their dad, so you're going to interact with them differently. And so having that level of intentionality and that level of wanting to glorify God in the sense, I think you bring in that humility of, I need to get to know this person so that I can train them along in that. So knowing that Riley is the way that she is, I can interact with each step, interact with whatever she's doing.
Just thought
and
about
know
this.
her.
I think what really is important is that your kids know that you love them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's crucial. Like it allows
from
you to,
the position of Christ.
It'll like that you love them unconditionally.
Yes.
And I think that allows you the premise to be able to have a situation where you have to have a hard conversation where they know your perspective of them is not shaped by that.
Yeah.
You love them regardless of what they do. And I think that that's probably something that you start embedding in their minds at a young age.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there is a possibility that you can screw that up at a young age where you can set a premise where it's a conditional relationship as long as you do the right thing.
Then I love you.
Yeah. But it's my last thought on that, because I know we need to wrap this up. But like, I think that's one of the things that probably parents don't talk about enough is like, how do I show my kid that I love them?
Yeah. And that's going to be different per kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting to know how they accept that and how they receive that. Yeah.
Riley hitting Hannah made me think of a quote by Tozer, who said that, we come into this world separated from God. We come into this world sinners. And he goes, the only reason that an infant doesn't strangle its mother for the breast milk is because its grip is too weak.
That's so true.
It's true, yeah. Riley wanted that granola bar, man. She was going to fight for it.
And that's a great thought.
That is, yeah. It's really
it's
good.
not a great thought, but
No,
it's
but
a correct thought.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How great.
You're going to paint that this year?
I'm sure some Renaissance person probably already has, some little demon baby.
Yeah, no,
Was that
the
what
kid's
that
breastfeeding while holding a knife above the mom?
was that what that MLK sculpture was? Did y'all see that?
Mm-mm.
It is the strangest thing I've ever seen. I still don't know what it is.
Oh, is it the one where they're like, it's like two arms or
It
whatever?
looks like arms, but I don't even know.
It felt super
Maybe that's
weird.
what it is. It's like, give me some milk.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's
Well,
funny.
we'll have to talk about this again, I think, at some point, because there's
absolutely.
a lot, I think, to say.
Well, and I feel like I've like talked through some stuff now. I'd love to talk about what it looks like again in a year or so.
Like having another kid as well. So
There you go.
I'll have more to grow and learn from that as well.
A better real dad.
A better real dad. Real dad part 2. Dope. So do you have a simpler thought, Micah? Simpler view of parenting?
Let Jesus be your premise and love your kids.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it is as simple as that. Like, I mean, it's going to take shape. I think what people want
unconditionally.
Unconditionally.
Love your kids
Yeah.
unconditionally.
You had brought up like that people want the parenting 101. They want like the steps. They want all those things. And what's funny is that like I think you can broaden that to that's how people want Christianity to be. Like they like, God, just tell me your plan. Tell me what you want me to do. Tell me and I'll do it. And I think that there's actually, and maybe it's just my question for you as being a scheduler and things like that. Do you find more freedom in the truth of the gospel, that there isn't a step-by-step to please God, to stay within the framework of God? Or would you rather, there even now in knowing the gospel, like more fully, would you rather have a step-by-step thing that God gives you?
No. So I grew up in a really legalistic environment, at church, home, whatever. And I thrived in it. I was a good kid at church and I was a good kid at home, and I did what I was because I knew what the rules were.
Yeah.
And so I do like rules, but where I'm at now, and I feel like I have a more correct understanding of the gospel, I would much rather be on the freedom side of it.
Gotcha.
Although I still do better on Sunday afternoon, knowing what every moment of my week ahead looks like.
Yeah, you still implement a schedule within the freedom that you have.
When you say you do better, like, do you mean like it's more comfortable, or you function in life better?
No, me personally, for example, you guys picked me up this morning at 7:45. In my head, that's 7:45. And if it's 8:05, it throws off my schedule in my head. And it makes me uneasy. I can readjust, but I am someone who likes my schedule because I know what to expect. And here's another way to say it. There were a lot of times in my home growing up when you left for school in the morning, you didn't know what home you were coming into when we came home.
True.
And so I don't like the unknown and I don't like the unexpected, but that's a holdover from my childhood and not
interesting.
And so Ryan Dalglish works really well with a schedule.
And you bringing that schedule into the freedom you have in Christ doesn't diminish the freedom in Christ.
No.
And it doesn't change how you view how I might do
my
life.
approach to Christ now is not scheduled.
Yeah, absolutely. So
My approach to Christ now is freedom.
and the reason why I ask it that way is because my go-to is to hear the simpler view of parenting. Like have Jesus has the premise and love your kids unconditionally. And I think there's not a schedule that's so freeing. Like there's not a step-by-step. That's so much more freeing. I can just take this and run with it.
100%.
But I don't
There's
know
a lot of
I don't
people
know
who
if I'm
feel
thinking that.
differently.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm thinking, I want to tell everybody, look how much freeing this is, but that may not be fair to everybody. That might be more freeing
I think
to
for
me.
you and I, it's reactionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also the more that I've come to know, I think there is the initial reaction as well, but I think also the more that I've come to know Christ, kind of like what you're saying of like knowing the gospel more fully and more clearly, I think that there's it's probably really not so much the fact that it's more freedom necessarily, but it's just a truer understanding of who Christ is and who he's made you to be. So therefore you're more comfortable in that truth.
It's at least a simpler perspective.
That's exactly what it is, man.
Yeah.
So, anyway, So, set Christ as the premise and love your kids unconditionally.
Yeah,
and we long to hear your stories. We long to hear about your households. And also Mike has talked about some shifts and changes and like eye-opening things in this conversation as well. Like, what are you guys' thoughts? You guys who are watching and listening, like, we want to know what it may be your, the great feats of parenting of like when God made something click for you with your kids, or if it was just through failure, like through something going wrong. Like we'd love to hear your stories with your parenting.
And I think Micah's honesty today reveals that we're all still learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're all growing.
And it shows how much we can grow and learn through community, through God's.
My kids are almost grown, and
So yeah, you know who my favorite kid in life is Steven, man. Steven, man. I have a friend whose name is Esteban, and I made a joke at band practice one time. I just called him Steven, and that stuck real hard, which is so funny to me because his name is 100% Esteban. We're like, wait, what's up, Steven? So we should start calling
Esteban.
Steven Esteban.
But can we do it like? Can we do it like? But it's Steven, but it sounds like Esteban, like Esteban.
Esteban. So a huge thank you to Esteban. Yes, they like slow down and everything too. We're at The Garden Audio. Go check him out on social media. Follow at The Garden Audio. He's sharing good stuff over there. He's got good Instagram stories. Also, everything that you see here, he put together this studio. He bought the gear. He edits every week. And so if you have questions on that, just how he does audio engineering for the podcast, he'd love to talk about that. So So go over to Instagram, follow him at The Garden Audio. While you're there, follow at Simpler Pod. That's us. And see what we got going on, see all the fun stuff that we're sharing through the show notes and through our social media. You can also find all of our personal pages. So if you want to catch up with Micah with all of his travels with Eagles Wings and stuff like that, I know you posted the other day, Ryan, that you'll be painting a little bit less this year, but you'll still be updating through your social media and keeping your life.
That lion was dope.
Thanks, man.
It really was, yeah. So if you haven't seen Ryan's first painting of 2023, go over there. Go check out his social media. Tell him how much you like it.
Quick, because I can't imagine it'll last long.
That's true. Yeah, go get that.
I'm surprised it lasted a week.
I am
if I'm
too.
being honest.
Absolutely. And if you just want to see my resourceful daughter, you can go follow me on social media. But hey, we love you guys and we're thankful for you guys. And we love that we're still doing this in 2023. 101st episode. Here we are. We're doing it and we're still pushing on. We love it. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
Micah's got to hurry and go pee.